I would think in my lifetime that I would be seeing what we're seeing in our measurements. I'd probably say, wow, probably not, but it's pretty ambitious, because sometimes we see such levels of order in our community's brains when they apply that formula, that we just found the articles that said that the mathematical probability of this type of coherence happening in the brain is statistically impossible, and if it occurred, it would occur as a momentary phenomenon that's random. And so our collective groups of people are sustaining these states for extended periods of time. So we can see dramatic changes in people's brain circuitry, but not only their circuitry, but this thing called coherence. And coherence is order, it's rhythm. So the antithesis is, if you're living in stress and you're living in survival, you feel like you can't control something, you feel like you can't predict something, and you have the perception that something's getting worse. And the arousal of those stress hormones causes you to shift your attention from one person to another problem, to another thing, to another place. And every one of those elements has a neurological network in the brain. So the arousal in the brain is saying there's an emergency, try to control everything, try to predict everything, prepare for the worst. And you start firing all these circuits and individually. You shift your attention to your boss, to your coworkers, or whatever, and you start causing the brain to fire very incoherently. And when the brain is incoherent, we're incoherent. And when the brain isn't working right, we're not working right. So then the arousal causes us to narrow our focus on the material world as our senses become heightened, and we focus on everything that's physical and material, and we start over-focusing. That's what stress does. So we thought, what if we taught people to do the opposite? Instead of narrowing their focus on whatever is material or known to them, let's have them open their focus and broaden their focus and put their attention on nothing physical and put it on nothing, on space, on energy.
Yeah.
And if we can create what's called a divergent focus, is it possible that the brain would begin to fire more coherently? And all of a sudden, we started seeing the front of the brain talking the back of the brain and synchronizing areas together, and what syncs in the brain links in the brain. And all of a sudden, you see the person starting to feel more whole. You keep doing that, more coherence creates more energy. The waves start standing and they start building on each other. And when that happens, there's an arousal that ultimately takes place in the brain, but the arousal is not fear. The arousal is not pain or aggression, and the arousal is not is anger. The arousal is ecstasy. The arousal is bliss. The arousal is love.
That sounds pretty good.
And the person,
where do I sign up?
Well, here's the cool part about it is that when that occurs, the stimulation that's being created, and we see these high gamma patterns that are off the scale. The arousal that's taking place is not taking place from anything out there in the environment. It's not taking place from the sports car, or the wardrobe, or the movie, or the cell phone. It's happening inside the person, and all of a sudden, that's a new feeling. They've never had that feeling before, and they start feeling connected. The side effect of that is even greater levels of order in the brain, and all of a sudden, the heart gets very turned on. It gets very signaled, and the person is moving into an elevated state. And that kind of combination of energy between the heart and the brain causes the person to become creative, not a little creative, but really seeing possibilities. They're conscious of things they were never conscious before. And that's a greater level of awareness, and that's a greater level of energy. And so people all of a sudden start seeing synchronicities that start taking place in their life because they have a coherent brain and a coherent heart, and you got a Wi-Fi signal, and you feel connected to something. You don't feel separate. Stress causes us to feel separation and lack, and this feeling makes you feel whole, and all of a sudden all the things that you wanted because you were in lack, you no longer want because you feel like you have them. And that's the kind of place where you can relax more into the present moment and enjoy the sunset and enjoy the meal and enjoy the conversation and enjoy the connection because you're present. And I say that that's a skill. A lot of people don't know what to do when they have that thought. They have no formula that's scientific and practical, that if they can practice enough times, if nerve cells that fire together wire together, then nerve cells that no longer fire together no longer wire together. And if you stick with it, and we can tell you this, that sooner or later, that thought is going to start to have a weakening effect on your mind until ultimately it's no longer going to be there because you no longer paid attention to it, no longer accepted it, no longer believed it, no longer surrendered to it. And most people, when they get to this point, Mark, they think, I'm doing my meditation wrong. And I always tell them, no. You're actually doing it right. That's what I want you to see. That's standing in the way between you and your happiness. On the other side of that is a whole new area that you get to wire your brain any way you choose. So then there's an unlearning process before the relearning process. There's a breaking a habit of the old self and a reinvention of a new self. You got to prune synaptic connections, and then you got to practice sprouting new ones. You got to unfire and unwire. You got to refire and rewire. You got to deprogram and reprogram. You got to lose your mind and create a new one. And you have to unmemorize emotions that keep you connected to the same familiar past, and then recondition the body to a new mind and to a new emotion. So then that process, if there's a formula to apply, let's just say, you sitting in your meditation, it means
because it sounds good, right? But how do you get from here to there? I'm sure everybody's thinking who's listening.
Yeah, of course. No, but everybody's done it. They've done it. They just haven't made it a habit. And so then if you're sitting in a meditation and you have something to do and your body starts going, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, and it's my ex-wife, it's my whatever, and you go like this to your body. Okay, now listen, you settle down and you know exactly what to do, and you tame the animal, you tell it to settle, stay, and you relax it back into the present moment. What I want you to know.
Down, boy.
Sit. That's a victory. That's a victory. Yeah. And then if the body starts going, I got to get up, I got to check my cell phone, I got to go, I got a meeting, I'm busy, and you notice that your body's habituated into the same predictable future, and you settle your body back down into the present moment. Now you're executing a will that's greater than those unconscious programs, and that's a victory. And if you keep doing this over and over again, just like training an animal, the body's going to stay. It's going to surrender to a new mind. And when that occurs, there's a liberation of energy, and the person relaxes into the present moment. That's the unknown. The familiar past is the known. The predictable future is the known. The only one place left is the sweet spot of that generous present moment. Now let's get the person so familiar with their unconscious thoughts that when it comes, they don't respond to them. So aware of their habits and behaviors. So conscious of the emotions that they typically feel in a waking day. They would never go unconscious to that emotion again. And you say to the person, hey, Mark, what thoughts do you want to fire and wire in your brain? And with intention, and attention, if we showed you how to do that, nerve cells that fire together, wire together. Just take a little repetition, a little presence, you start installing the hardware. Keep doing it. It's going to become a software program. What does that mean? That's going to be the new voice in your head that says, Mark, you can do it. But if you said then, okay, how am I going to be with my coworkers? How am I going to be with my employees? How am I going to be with my ex-wife? What would greatness look like today? And you sat down and closed your eyes and you rehearsed in your mind how you were going to be in every one of those situations. If you study the research in neuroscience, mental rehearsal installs neurological hardware in your brain to look like you already did it.
Yeah, that's when I think about my serve before I serve, and I do it better.
Of course, because you produce that mind. So if you keep doing that, you install hardware, practice it and rehearse it. It becomes a software program, which means you start behaving that way. Now, here's the challenging part. Can you teach your body emotionally what the future reality that you want to live in feels like before it happens? Now, this is very difficult if you've been conditioned into believing something in your outer world has to change to take away the emptiness or the lack, to make you feel differently. This is saying, actually feel the emotion before it happens and don't wait for the experience to occur. Teach your body what the feeling will be before it occurs. If the environment signals the gene and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, you're signaling the gene ahead of the environment, and genes make proteins, and proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body, and the expression of proteins is the expression of life. So teach the body emotionally to self-regulate, to believe it's living in an environment that's flourishing, that's wonderful. Keep practicing it, and it'll become familiar to you. And the process then creates a new identity, and it's not difficult once you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And the more you combine all those different branches of science and make it in a simple way to understand, if people understand the what and the why, the how gets easier because you can assign meaning to what you're doing and it becomes instrumental. So get a group of people, 1,000 people, 1,500 people, 2,000 people into a room, teach them that information, whether they're coming for wealth or health, a relationship, a new career, a mystical experience. Get them all together and teach them and measure what can take place in a 1 week period of time. And I assure you, that's more than 75% of the people that go through and go all in and retreat from their lives and remove the same stimulation from their environment and not be in the same conditions and teach them that information and give them numerous opportunities to apply it and numerous opportunities to get beyond themselves. All you need is that first person that stands on the stage and says, hey, I walked in here with Parkinson's disease. I have no idea what happened, but I'm not trembling anymore. And boy, that last thing, just something clicked for me. And the person in the audience was watching the 4-minute mile right in front of them and going, wow, that guy looks like he's not a vegan. He doesn't look like he's particularly in shape, but his Parkinson's went away. And wow, I mean, if he could do it, I could do it. And somebody else changes their belief. And now that's a footprint in consciousness. Get enough people doing that. By the end of the week, you're going to see things. We've seen blind people seeing, deaf people hearing, not once, not twice.
Really?
We've seen people with strokes for 10 years lift their arms up again. We've seen people step out of wheelchairs, people on crutches drop their crutches. I mean, you see the body literally recalibrates to a new mind. And they're not intentionally trying to do anything. They're just becoming somebody else. But the process of overcoming is the process of becoming. And if you teach people that formula and you get just 1 or 2 people doing it, it's just going to become an infection, and it's going to wellness is going to spread just like disease.
That's good.